Everybody, KH4350 Fitness Program Management. Just wanted to talk today a little bit about general guidelines for papers going forward, including this class, which most obviously you have your final draft to complete. And I'm hoping that this will be able to help some of us out because the purpose of this class, obviously, we don't have an English class per se. I'm not grading you so much on grammar and spelling and writing issues, but I do want to be helpful and give you critical feedback. For the most part, I found everybody's rough drafts to be quite good. Again, some minor problems and issues, but I didn't take off any points if I saw anything that was just flagrant or just egregious in your writing. But I do want to tell you that for those of you who are going on and pursuing future career paths and climbing the ladder of management or even graduate studies and continuing on with school and other kinds of required certifications in your future endeavors, writing is quite important, no question about it. And again, I can tell you that you would want to get your hands on some basic books. For example, the American Psychological Association APA Publication Manual, 6th edition. You can find it fairly affordably either on Amazon or what have you, any of the book sites. Get your hands on that copy, please, because that will really help with the mechanics of writing style, which you'll find this will not be the last time you hear this, obviously. I'm sure you've heard other GSU instructors or other people tell you that writing is very fundamental and you will improve. The best way to get better at writing is to practice and to continue with writing. And so what I wanted to do for the benefit of hopefully helping us out is not only preparing us for our final draft, I wanted to give you all general feedback on what I found to be probably the most common mistakes or problems that I saw. And again, I did not take off too many points in your rough draft if I saw these mistakes. In fact, if you may see your rough draft paper, for the most part, you have to be almost like a detective and go in there and after watching today's PowerPoint, ask yourself, did I make any of those mistakes? Because if you did and I didn't take off points, your final draft, I'll be looking out to see if you went back and did your detective work and revised or fixed feedback, because spelling grammar check on Microsoft Word, it's not always going to find everything, and we're going to take a look at some of the examples here in a second. But just please make sure you go through, if anything, get somebody like a peer or somebody close to you that you trust to read your paper, or even after you complete your final draft, read it out loud and pretend you were presenting it. Does it make sense? Because I find when you read it out loud, that's when you'll probably find some of your problems, to when you ask yourself, gosh, that just didn't sound normal. So writing should sound normal in terms of communication, but it definitely is an art. And again, I believe that you can get better at it, just like anything else. It's just practice. First of all, let's start with one of the items here. Rubric was pretty standard with telling you about, font and size and, all the terms of how you're supposed to write your paper. But one thing that it's important going forward, always insert a title page, even if it's not required. I would always encourage you to have a title page with your name and date and the title of the class. In this case, for example, you would have put KH4350 Fitness Program Management. It's a nice, clean sheet. Again, just for lack of a better word, title page inserted there distinguishes what the person, whoever you're presenting this to, is about to read. And again, I know that while this class is not so much on nitpicky of, I'm going to take off points if you don't put a title page. That's not the point of it. Just in the future, please make sure that whatever paper you're submitting, even if the instructor doesn't require it, go ahead and get that title page. And again, as a reference, you can go back to the APA publication manual, and everything in there gives you a good solid base, a foundation on how to do a title page. Now, the format of the paper, in this case, you're always generally looking for Times New Roman, size 12, double spaced. You're looking at everything in just nice, good uniform and clean, just everything looks so much easier for whoever's writing it. So, for example, whenever there's going to be somebody reading your paper, if you've turned it in and you have a font that's different, like Arial or Calibri or what have you, that might confuse the reader and maybe question, well, did they do a check to see if they formatted their paper correctly? So just please be careful with that. Here's another question that I saw in a lot of papers. Some of you put one space after a period of completing a sentence. Some of you put two spaces after completing a sentence. Some of you put one space after a sentence and two spaces after separate sentences, which in that latter would really confuse the reader. Why would that be? And we'll get to consistency here in a moment. What's correct, one space or two space? We've learned this growing up, generally, different schools of thought. Most writing style, I would encourage you to do one space. And one of the reasons why I find good consistency with just doing one space, it allows you to put more quality in your writing. Because if you're going to put two spaces in after each sentence, that's going to limit you, I believe, in terms of what you can put in there, because that just takes away. Sometimes less is more, and I believe this is one of those times. But just please be consistent, whatever school of thought you were brought up. You want to just stay with one of those. And again, if it were me, I would choose the one space. But again, there are a lot smarter people than yours truly telling you this, and that's why I always encourage you to go to the GSU library, get an appointment time with a librarian. It might be hard right now, obviously, with what's going on today physically, but you can certainly remotely or over the phone get time with them, and use Galileo. Use your resources at your library, because everything I'm telling you here on in is just basically drawn out for you in a much more articulate way than I could ever do. Paragraph indentation. I saw a lot of papers that I was confused by that turned in paragraphs that either had no indentation, or I saw some paragraphs that were indented and some that weren't in the same paper, which was very confusing. I don't understand why that would be. Generally speaking, a paragraph's going to be about half an inch over whenever you do a new paragraph and you start that paragraph. And speaking of paragraphs, how many sentences are in a paragraph? Generally speaking, the rule of thumb is usually at least 4 to 5 sentences for a paragraph. I saw some paragraphs in papers that had 2 to 3 sentences, which is definitely a little too minimal. But then I saw some paragraphs that had about 18 to 20 sentences, so please be careful with that. Structure-wise, does the paragraph make sense? Was there a reason why your paragraph might have been a little bit longer than that or shorter than that? Maybe there was, but you want to check your consistency on that. And speaking of consistency, that's another issue that came up a lot in many of your papers. So for example, I'll give you a quick example here. One of the papers, and again, just to maintain confidentiality, I'm not going to name anybody in this presentation, would basically write a title of a gym, and it's not this one I'm about to say, but let's just say for the sake of argument, let's say they wrote Gold's Gym, okay? And they wrote Gold's Gym capitalized, and that's the way it should be. Gold's with a capital G, G with a capital Gym, and that's how that would be. But then other parts in the paper, it would be Gold's is capitalized, and then Gym would be not capitalized. And then other parts, they would go back to capitalizing both words, which, again, is quite confusing. And another time that could be confusing is when you're not maintaining consistency of the proper name. For example, I saw a paper that wrote the YMCA of, such and such. Let's just make up YMCA of Atlanta, blah, blah. Then later in the paper, it said the Y is known for yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. So yes, the YMCA is known short as the Y. That is acceptable. But again, that could be confusing to your reader. Maintain consistency. If you're going to write YMCA through the paper, do it only that way. Or if you're just going to write the Y, you can do that at the beginning. You could write YMCA of Atlanta and then parentheses, AKA, or also known as the Y. That's fine. And then you can go forward and write the Y. I hope that makes sense. Speaking of consistency, contractions. This is an important one as well. The use of contractions. In papers, generally speaking, you do not want to use contractions whenever you're using verbs, for example. So, for example, let's just say you're writing your paper and you say, I'm about to tell you about my experience it'd be better to say, instead of I'm about to, it'd probably be better to say I am about to tell you about my experience such and such. Whenever you see contractions, are there times when you use contractions? Certainly, absolutely. And we'll see some examples of them here going forward in the PowerPoint. But I'll give you another example. If you're quoting somebody verbatim and you're going to quote that person and they use a contraction, let's just say that you're quoting the manager, what they told you word for word, and they said, hey, you're here on time. I like that. You wouldn't change that to the manager said, quote, you are here on time. So again, I know that's nitpicky. Just please be careful with that. Okay. Present versus past tense goes back to consistency here for a second. There was nothing in the rubric that told you whether you had to do present or past, right? So in this case, you could have chosen either or, but not both. So, for example, I did see papers that wrote the tenses and mixing them up, which is very confusing. Whoever's reading your paper is going to say, wait a minute, is this in the past or is this person presently writing this paper? You need to stick with one or the other, and generally speaking, since this was your experience at those gyms, I would find that probably past would be appropriate, but just make sure you do that across the board. You wouldn't change that, unless, for example, if you're inserting something there in the future, they're going to be charging this much for their membership. That's fine, but for maintaining consistency, again, tense definitely matches with consistency a lot. Citations and referencing. Please be careful with this. Again, visit any kind of resources you have to if you're going to be putting citations and references. Now, this paper certainly didn't require you to do that. I wasn't expecting to see that unless you are actually quoting somebody. For example, according to IRSA, in 2018, such and such percentage of individuals in America had cardiovascular disease. You got to make sure you both cite and then reference that at the end. You can't just make up or throw in a statistic out there, because then that can be considered plagiarism, and you really have to be careful with plagiarism. That's probably one of the most blatant, flagrant problems that you can present upon yourself, even if it's unintentional. Is there such a thing as, yeah, but I didn't know that that was plagiarism? That doesn't excuse it from being plagiarism. Or if you're throwing a statistic out there, I found that this fitness center is charging such and such percentage more than this gym. Well, where's the proof on that? Did you just make that up, or do you actually have evidence? So if you're going to be referencing, I would stick to current references, meaning probably no more than 3 to 5 years old. The more current, the better, obviously. And then finally, before we jump into this, to give you some examples, content is king. I think some of you heard me say this over and over. What do I mean by that? This is what I was grading you on, by the way. This last item right here. I was grading on content. Did your paper basically have what I asked you to do within the paper? For example, if you were successful in going ahead and visiting 2 sites, and you gave me your experience and the facts from the gyms, you probably would have done very well on this paper. You should have, because that was your experience. Who am I to question if you're not accurate? Because you're the one that did the work on that. And again, with this whole phenomenon that we're experiencing through today that affected some of us, that we could only visit 1 site, you still probably could have done very well, just as well as if you visited 2 sites, because we forgave that with everything going on. However, if you were not able to visit either site before spring break, that was an issue, and we've said multiple times continuously, we've streamlined this all throughout the first several months together in class, the stress of urgency to visit these sites. In my opinion, it would have been impossible for anybody to believe that they could go to 2 different sites during spring break and be able to turn this paper in and turn it around on such short notice. To me, that is just a sign that you weren't taking the assignment as carefully as you should have been and devoting the time respected and needed to complete this assignment. Again, for example, if I were to do this assignment myself, I would have probably had to have dedicated many hours to this just to get all my thoughts collectively together. And that's why, if you didn't make it to either site before spring break, that's probably could have been a big part of where points were lacking, because from the very beginning, we had said the GSU Recreation Center was off limits. And so just having that as a backup or as an option for you to complete and turn your paper in, that's going to be a big uphill challenge for any of you that turned in a paper on the rough draft for that. When you turn in your final draft, if I'm speaking to you right now, for any folks in here that have that latter option, you've got a real challenge on your hands here to do a 5-page paper, and we've talked about what the requirements will be to hopefully be successful on that paper. So just again, let's stick to content, quality. Go back to that list again. This is for everybody, by the way, and look at, did you answer all of the questions that I've asked on that original paper that talked about, you can go back and look at the individual paper project and see what the list of items I was looking for. In addition, not only not on that paper, but what have we covered in class? A lot that was not on that paper. Did we talk about different types of programs and how it addresses the ADA and how it addresses staff development? How about marketing and brand awareness? How about current contemporary things such as social media and brand awareness, Facebook, Instagram, the giants? I didn't see a lot of that, smart apps on the phones. I was very surprised that was lacking from many of the papers that were turned in. That really surprised me. But I'm not speaking to everybody because some of you did complete that. And so, again, I can go on and on this last item here on content, but I think we know where we're coming from. If you need any questions or further explanation, now's the time. Call me or email me and let me know if we need to set up an appointment and talk about that in further discussion. But let's go ahead and jump into this first, okay? The way I'm going to do this is going to take certain sentences from papers, and we're going to figure out if they're correct or incorrect. And so, for example, the first one here, we're dealing with a contraction issue. The gym's hours are posted on the front door. The contraction of the right there in the gym's word, that apostrophe needs to go after the letter M before the letter S. So it would be GYM apostrophe S, differentiating from singular versus plural. Now, if the person who was turning this paper in were saying, well, I'm talking about two different gyms here, they would be correct then, because then it'd be plural. But in this case, they weren't. This was a singular meaning. So singular, that apostrophe needs to go over. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on these because a lot of these are nitpicky, I'll admit, but at the same time, I just want to make sure nobody makes the same mistakes twice. He rescheduled my tour after missing our appointment in spite of everything. Got a couple of problems going on here. In spite of everything is not a complete sentence. For one, we might recognize that. But for another, what this person may have wanted to do was maybe make this a combined sentence. And the way I would write it, here's what I would do. I would turn this around and reverse things. I would start with, in spite of everything, comma, he rescheduled my tour after missing our appointment. You see where we're going with that? That would probably be a better way of writing, because another part of writing style is, again, just the passive voice versus an active voice. You want to make sure you have an active voice, and that would kind of clean this one up. In case the staff did not notice me, I made sure to stand directly in front of them. The only mistake I see in this one would be a comma after the word me. Again, if you're starting with any type of, in this case, a prepositional phrase, in case the staff did not notice me, just read it out loud. Again, that would help out and say, well, let's see, I need to pause after that word me, so I probably would put a comma there. And grammatically, that would be correct, by the way. If you visit this gym, you're going to have a similar reaction. Now, here we go. This looks like we've got a problem that's twofold. One, I believe the person was trying to say, you're, meaning Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, you're going to have a similar reaction. But if it were me, I just discussed this a few minutes ago, I would probably write, if you visit this gym, comma, you are going to have a similar reaction. So we're not using a contraction when not needed. I don't believe it's the fitness center's policy. Okay, a few things here. Again, do not would be preferable. But here's a couple other problems. It's implying it is, correct? So I do not believe it is the fitness center's policy. Would probably be better. Now, here's another thing too. I just caught this as well. In the word centers, you need an apostrophe after the R before the S. So again, that would break that up. Now that would be appropriate. Do you see the difference? Fitness center's policy, that's implying the possession of it. The fitness center's policy would have an apostrophe. What would not would be the word its, meaning it is. The director informed me that their website is linked to the hospitals. Okay, what I see in the problem here is the word their. Let's just sound that out. The director informed me that our website is linked to the hospital. See the problem there? That's where there should be a totally different word. Their, T-H-E-I-R, would be possession, indicating that is the hospital's website. Okay. The personal trainer finished her client's workout session, and she welcomed me with a pleasant greeting. That's a good sentence. I like that. I don't see any problems with that, with the exception to one thing, and you may have caught it. After the word session, there should be a comma there before the word and. Those are two complete sentences. A compound sentence, whenever you're combining two sentences, do need to be broken up with a comma. So that's the only thing missing in this sentence. Put a comma after session before the word and, if that was your paper. That gym had a lasting effect on me. Okay. Very confusing here. And again, I bet that majority of us who saw this sentence would probably say, well, that's correct. What's the problem with that? Affect. Whenever you use the word affect versus effect, E-F-F-E-C-T, which it should be in this case, that's challenging. Trust me on this one, because I have this problem all the time. Affect is used as a verb. So if you are affecting somebody, that's when you would use the word affect. In this case, this person, whoever wrote this, had a lasting effect, which means they should change that affect to E, basically. E-F-F-E-C-T. They say that a new member should be provided an orientation for their safety. Okay. This is a common pet peeve of mine. I see this problem a lot, and for the majority of you, you may have made a problem like this, which again, believe me, I make the same mistake as well. Did anybody catch what's the problem in this one? You may or may not have. And I bet that if you didn't catch the problem in this one, you may have this mistake in your paper as well. The use of singular and plural, indicating they say that a new member, they're talking about one member here, whoever wrote this, one single person, provide an orientation for whose safety? The member's safety, right? Well, why did they write there? There is incorrect. What would be appropriate, the way you could fix this is saying, they say that a new member should be provided an orientation for his or her safety. Or you've probably heard of an orientation for one's safety. That's fine as well, but that needs to match up. That one's or his or her is singular, meaning that matches up with member. So another way you could fix it, saying, well, I don't like the way that sounds. Here's what I sometimes will do. I'll pluralize both of those. They say that new members should be provided an orientation for their safety would be then appropriate. Because you see, you change the word member to members, then it could. That's just a consistency issue. I accepted the therapist's offer to come shadow his patients. Okay, couple of problems here. I accepted, while it sounds right, you might not catch that. Neither would spelling grammar, because when you use spelling grammar check, that's going to not catch that this word is incorrect. And even when you sound it out, and you sound it out as you're speaking it, I accepted the therapist's offer. That sounds fine. Well, the problem is, accepted here should be spelled A-C-C-E-P-T-E-D. And then the other problem, at the end of this sentence, shadow his patients. I don't think that whoever's shadowing is shadowing the therapist, how patient they are. I think they meant that they want to shadow the therapist's customers or clients, or in this case, patients, meaning P-A-T-I-E-N-T-S would be appropriate. See, we got a couple of problems there. I tried avoiding the club manager's offensive breath. He just kept talking. Okay. What we need to change here is, that's a run-on sentence, as we can tell. Breath, and then he just kept talking. You can fix this by either putting a semicolon after the word breath, or you could break it up and just do a period and then just do a complete new sentence. He just kept talking. Or you could put a comma there after breath, and then you can put the word but. He just kept talking. However you want to clean that up, that's fine. I honestly don't think she hears what her staff tells her. I would change don't to do not. Think she hears. Here's another here, meaning not H-E-R-E-S. H-E-A-R-S would be correct in this case, because you're hearing with your ears. So that would fix that. Their fees were slightly higher than other places that I visited. Another common, this sentence sounds fine with exception of one thing. The word then should be than. If you're comparing two items, in this case, fees, then you need to change it to THAN instead of THEN. Very tricky, very common problem too. They open at 5 a.m. because they found that people love coming in early. Sounds fine, but we've got an extra comma in there when we don't need it. If you take that comma out, that has fixed this sentence. There's no need for a comma because that is not needed before the word because. They were accommodating to both my friend and I. Sounds correct, and most people would probably say that when they say that out loud. Like, they were nice to my friend and I, but it should be to both my friend and me. You need to change that word I to me. After a verb, you do not say the word I or we. Instead, you would say to me or to us. I found the gym to be quite lovely. Okay. The word quiet, that looks like, again, spelling grammar check wouldn't have caught that, but just flip the E and the T, and that'll change the word quiet to quite lovely. Unless, let me go back to that. They could have maybe meant that gym was quiet, and the way they could fix that if they wanted to do that. I'm sure whoever wrote that didn't imply it, but they could write, I found their gym to be quiet and lovely. I guess you could fix that up, but I'm pretty sure they meant quite. Wait, I just found another thing too. Did you catch it? I found their gym to be quiet. There should be THEIR. There's one indicated. And again, I know I'm going through these pretty quickly, so hopefully I haven't not caught anything else. But there to there, and then quiet to quite. They were closed for lunch from noon through 1 p.m. All right. One thing that I see here, the word through. I don't think that they're implying that they're throwing anything out the door or throwing it in the garbage. Through should be THROUGH, and that would fix that problem. Just change the word through. I thought their price was fair, irregardless of the competitor's price. At this point, I hope that most of us know that irregardless is not a word. It could be added to a slang dictionary or accepted just because a lot of people use it over time. But in a paper, that would be taken off. I would think that spell check they might not catch that as well, too, because, again, but irregardless is just not a word. It should be regardless. 2 locations I visited were Orange Theory Fitness and CrossFit. Okay. This is an interesting one. Did you catch, is this correct or incorrect? Most of us reading this would say, I don't see a problem with that at all. And at first, I didn't either. I thought, what's the problem in this one? But when I looked at it closer, and this was an interesting one, because I educated myself on this, I had to look it up. Orange Theory Fitness, the way it's written, you have to write it the way that the gym presents itself if you're writing it in a paper. Orange Theory Fitness is not 3 words. Orange Theory Fitness is 2 words, believe it or not. So actually, that the way they write it up, and you can Google it or you can go to their website, they actually put the word Orange Theory all as one word, even though in our educated minds we might think, well, that doesn't make sense. Why is that? Orange Theory should be 2 words. But if they're selling their brand as one word, then you have to write it out the way they do. Orange Theory, all is one word. And even that T would be lowercase. So it needs to be all lowercase with exception to the letter O preceding Orange Theory. CrossFit should actually be one word, yes, but here's a problem we've got. That F needs to be capitalized. We need to write it the way that CrossFit intends for itself to be recognized as. Otherwise, that's not CrossFit. It needs to be capital C, lowercase ROSS, capital FIT, all as one word. That would clean that up. Now, again, I know I went through those kind of quickly, but I didn't want to spend too much time on that because, again, overall, your papers were exceptional. I thought that everybody did a wonderful job. And so let's finish strong on this assignment. And if we covered anything that did not make sense, or the opposite, if we did not cover anything that you still need clarification or help on, now's the time. I encourage you, contact me or set up an appointment with me or whatever to figure out what we need to do so that you get a good grade on your final draft. Best of luck. Do your best. Again, the final draft's coming up and it's due pretty soon here. So let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next class, everybody. Thank you.